Oh God, Dane.
When I first started this challenge, I anticipated playing titles that would surprise me, both in good ways and bad. But I expected these to be the games I hadn't heard of. But when it came to popular IPs such as Persona, Final Fantasy, and Kingdom Hearts, I figured things were set and I knew what was going to be good and what was not. This led me to starting Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria, a title I had heard of and expected to be, an above average RPG. But expectations can be deceiving. I had no idea how much of a sleeping giant hid within these 160 titles I plan on completing. I want to thank Patreon Pro member Zeta for requesting this truly hidden gem. I know it's one of his favorite games, and now I understand why. Anyway, if you would like to skip the details of this review and just see a summary, jump ahead to the time on the screen. For everyone else, here are 10 things I liked and 10 things I did not like about Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria. Dislike 10. Lens Flare. As you can probably tell from the footage, VP2 is a beautiful game. The graphics are subtle, but immaculate in their design. Well, almost. VP2 has so much lens flare that it would make J.J. Abrams blush. It's literally my only complaint about the graphics. I also want to take a second to give a shout out to Boko Blisk and Nelvermillion for creating a nearly perfect 4K remaster patch, which I used a few hours into the game. Sure, it made the lens flare a whole lot worse, but it was worth it for shots like this. Like 10. Items are so useful. I don't know why this continues to surprise me with some games, but the fact that items are an integral part of the gameplay and not just a throwaway feature impresses me. During combat, you have an action point bar, which determines how many actions you can take before your opponent. I'll explain the battle system more later in this review, but why the AP bar is important here is that in order to use items, you have to use up some AP. Also, there's a cooldown time before you can use another item, which is good because some of these items are bonkers. There's an item that can completely fill your AP bar for a small portion of your team's HP. Another item makes your team invulnerable to a single attack. You also have healing items, attack items, and even items that double your accrued experience points. They are all useful, and the fact that the devs balance this with the AP mechanic shows that this title was masterfully crafted. Dislike 9. The Star Ocean sound effects. Yeah, I see you all out there. All you Trias fanatics. I know that these sound effects are loved, but I have to say, my first experience with these sounds came from Star Ocean, a series set in space. Hearing them in this Nordic epic just felt weird. I didn't like it. I know Konami started this with their Konami sounds, but I'm going to argue that it doesn't translate well here. Also, just remember that when my dislikes are nitpicks like this, it's a sign of a good game. Like 9. The Hall of Valhalla theme. The music of VP2 is both phenomenal while being functional. Rarely did the music stand out to me, which I would argue is the purpose of video game music. It's best as a background sound effect, subtly amplifying your experience. Of the different musical compositions though, 2 stood out to me. The first was the Overworld theme, which is an incredibly chill atmospheric piece. Take a listen. I always found myself pausing at this point to just take in these vibes. But what I think is the single best musical piece in the game was the theme of the Hall of Valhalla, a rousing operatic piece that will be a favorite of mine moving forward. Dislike 8. Chest traps. Why? This is so dumb. I hate this so much. Sorry, let me back up. So when exploring dungeons, you'll of course run across treasure chests filled with useful items, but you'll also be bombarded with a variety of traps. These traps are at best a nuisance and at worst a complete waste of time. They don't serve to make the game more challenging, they're just there to annoy. I'd say that 90% of the treasure chests are rigged with booby traps. Traps that freeze you, confuse you, or my personal favorite, poison your entire party. I mean, just look at this. I spent all this time trying to get to this chest, only to have it blow up in my face. Like 8. Splitting up your battle party. The battle system in VP2 is unique unto itself. I've never played anything like it. It's kind of like a mixture of an RTS and a beat 'em up. When entering battle, you'll be thrown into a small arena with enemies. The enemy's attack ranges are visible, and the player must navigate through the arena until an enemy is within range. Then it shifts to a side view, where the player can input attacks and string together combos. This is such a fun idea, and the longer I played, the more I realized just how truly deep this combat system goes. Case in point is the ability to divide your party during battle. In battle, you can bring 4 party members who are clustered together. But if you want to bait an enemy, or avoid narrow attacks, you can break off party members, creating smaller clusters. I noticed that the narrower the attack, the higher the damage, so having your party members attack from all sides forced many enemies to use a less effective AoE attack. Splitting your party is dead useful, and it took me nearly half my playthrough to recognize its value, despite Zeta telling me otherwise. Dislike 7. Getting caught while dashing. So as I was explaining, the battle system is really broken up into 2 parts. The positioning phase, where you avoid the enemy's attacks while getting in range, and the attack phase, where you combo the enemy into oblivion. During the first phase, the players can use up a portion of their AP bar to perform a dash. This thing is incredibly helpful when trying to get the high ground on enemies. But damn it if the arena's hitboxes aren't some of the most annoying things ever. I can't tell you how many times I thought I had my angles right, only to get hung up on an invisible wall. The worst part is that it still uses up AP. Every time this happened, it felt like a stab to the heart, and unfortunately, it happened fairly often. Like 7. The character and world design. Graphics are great and all, but without a good art direction, your game can end up looking like a dime store drag queen. Tri-Ace artists Yo Yoshinari, and Shunya Yamashita created not only a believable Nordic-inspired world of gods and humans, but a fantastical one filled with breathtaking vistas, inspiring enemy designs, and some of the most detailed character work I've ever seen on the system. I hope this makes sense, but early on in my playthrough, there's a cutscene that introduces a character named Rufus. Now just take a moment to look at the detail on this guy. This is amazing character design, but here's the interesting part of all this. I wasn't even sure if this was a main character or just some throwaway NPC. That's how impeccable the world design is. Rufus could have ended up being a character you interacted with for a few minutes, then moved on, and I wouldn't have blinked. I want to compare this with one of 2024's biggest disappointments, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Tetsuya Nomura's original designs have without doubt stood the test of time, but as you play this title, you can't help but feel like the rest of the world, its NPCs specifically, just can't match up. These are just AI-generated bots with slightly varying designs to give them a diesel punk feel. Now take a moment to look at the people in this village. Look at the details on some of these characters. What a lost art. Dislike 6. Intentional character design changes. So as I was looking over the official artwork for some of the characters, I couldn't help but notice some differences. Small differences, but differences nonetheless, all of which revolved around female characters. First is Rochelle, one of the first Einherjar you can acquire. Here's her official artwork. You'll notice she has some cleavage showing in her design. And here's her endgame model. Not too much of a difference, but still noticeable. Then there's Atracia, which is an archer I used all the way to the endgame. Now you might think it was her underboob that was edited, but you'd be wrong. It was actually her hair color. For some strange reason, she's a brunette instead of a blonde and looks like a little girl, which makes her revealed chest kinda weird. The final and most egregious change was with the light fighter Fraudair. You'll notice that her original design shows both her cleavage and midriff. Here's her endgame model. She almost looks like a copy of Rochelle. Both her cleavage and midriff is gone, replaced with armor. I tried to look into why they were changed, but couldn't find any information on the topic. Now, I want everyone to know that I really don't care. The in-game designs are still fantastic. I just don't care for censorship of this kind, assuming that is what this was. Either way, this is just another nitpick in a fantastic game. Like 6, exploring the maps. When I first started up this title, I had no idea how much it would have in common with games like Metroid or Castlevania. Exploration is almost identical to these titles, with you slowly revealing a map as you explore labyrinthian dungeons. But what sets it apart is the ability to turn enemies into crystals using photons. Alicia can fire out 3 of these magical bullets at a time and encase enemies in crystal for a short period. This is used in a surprisingly large variety of ways. First of all, if you freeze an enemy, then hit them with another photon, you'll switch places with them. This works well when trying to get to an upper ledge. Second, if you switch places with an enemy and hold the jump button, you'll perform a jump immediately after switching, again allowing you to get higher on the map. The final use is standing on top of enemies, creating small platforms to jump distances. When I saw a treasure chest high up, I would spend dozens of minutes messing around with photons and crystallize enemies until I reached it. This was surprisingly fun, and the mechanic is left open to interpretation. How you scale some of these dungeons is completely up to you. This sandbox approach shows once again that the devs knew what they were doing. Dislike 5, synthesizing items and breaking body parts. I'm starting to wonder if most RPGs just fail on the item synthesis side of things. Of all the synthesis mechanics I've encountered, VP2's may be the worst. Not only does the game not explain it to you, but even looking up instructions online left me confused. So here's how it works. If you go to a store and see a grayed out item, that's an item you can synthesize. In order to synthesize it, you must gather the material below, then sell it to the merchant. Once it's sold, the merchant will then have the item available for purchase. What is this? Why make it so convoluted? Just give the player the option to buy if they have all the items. Why hide this mechanic behind such an idiotic process? As if that wasn't enough, most of the items you will need to synthesize will come from broken enemy parts. Almost every enemy has a section of its body that can be broken off, be it a tail, horn, or wings. But here's the difficult part. You can't target body parts. It's left up to your approach and type of attack as to which body parts you'll target. Getting some of the rarest items is absurdly difficult. So absurd that I opted to ignore synthesis for the most part. Like 5, Palace of the Venerated Dragon. I pretty much loved every dungeon in this game. None of them felt repetitive, and each introduced a new mechanic. Sometimes this is puzzles, other times it's being able to destroy hostile crystals with photons. And then there's the Palace of the Venerated Dragon. This dungeon was easily the best in the game, with a room hopping mechanic that felt fresh. These weird statues are placed among enemies, and if they touch you, you are warped to a room full of poisonous gas. On top of this, you receive the ability to float, which allows you to reach far-off platforms. This was the most Metroidvania this game got. In the Palace of the Venerated Dragon, the atmosphere was engaging, and the enemies were difficult without being overpowered. Finally, you have the boss, one of my favorites. You fight the zombie dragon in a small arena with 3 magical orbs in each corner. The orbs power up the dragon, and if broken, the boss is severely weakened. Since the bosses up to this point had pretty much bent me over, it was fun to face off against a weakened one. I enjoyed this boss so much that I grinded levels here for an hour or two. Overall, of the many fantastic dungeons in this title, the Palace of the Venerated Dragon stands out as the best of the best. Dislike 4, losing story characters. In VP2, party customization is a major feature. In total, you acquire 10 story characters and 40 optional party members called Einherjar. By the time you reach the second dungeon, the story will provide you with a light fighter, heavy fighter, archer, and mage, meaning that even if you choose not to use the optional Einherjar, you can have a versatile team made up of story characters, which is really cool. I was told by Zeta and many others in the comments that Rufus was one of the best party members, but I didn't use him or any of the other story characters for one very important reason. I'm not new to the RPG genre, and in a game full of party members, sometimes certain ones leave your party either temporarily or permanently. I wasn't sure if this was going to happen in VP2, but to be safe, I stuck to my waifu team of Einherjar, and I was right. Aside from Alicia and Rufus, every other story character leaves your party. One is temporary, while all the others are permanent. Without spoiling much, in the last dungeon you gain 4 new story characters. Of the 4, only one of them can be used in the final fight. So overall, the story characters are a trap. Now, the game does try to address this. Whenever a character leaves your party, they leave behind a treasure chest. The contents of the chest depends on the existing party members' levels, and will be filled with items that give a ton of experience and even high-level weapons. That being said, I don't think this makes up for the loss. This is not an easy game. Your party's strategy going into battle is immensely important. Ensuring that your party is solid is invaluable, and having players you spent time building up leave that party is overall a nuisance I didn't want to deal with. Like 4. Alicia and Rufus. In stories, there is a well-known rule that if followed helps build a believable and immersive tale. And that rule is show, don't tell. In a book, this is a little more difficult as the readers can't see what's going on. But in movies and video games, it's almost always recommended that you follow the show, don't tell rule. Now, video games aren't known for being the greatest vessel for storytelling. After all, their main purpose is to first, be fun to play. The PS2 era's storytelling could be janky and awkward. But VP2's story is entirely different. Show Don't Tell is written all over this title, and I love it. But where this concept truly shines is in the development and relationship between the two main characters, Alicia and Rufus. Alicia is the princess of the human kingdom of Japan. Since birth, she's been possessed by the Valkyrie Silmeria, and thus kinda has two personalities. Silmeria is cold, confident, and calculating. Alicia is sweet, timid, brave, and caring. She empathizes with others effortlessly and gives everyone the benefit of the doubt. Rufus is a young wandering archer. Silmeria recognizes instantly that he's more than meets the eye. Alicia is commanded by her to hire him, and after a tense exchange, he agrees. Rufus's personality is opposite, yet the same as Alicia's. He's cynical and harsh, yet he can't help but assist those around him. Both of these characters are developed through subtle actions and exchanges. One of my favorite is when Alicia and Rufus are trying to escape some elves in the forest. They end up getting help from someone who has them slide down a secret passage into safety. The way Alicia makes sure her skirt doesn't fly up doesn't seem like a big deal, but it says so much about her character. Here they are, about to die and barely escaping with their lives, and she's still considering propriety. Because of moments like this, I found myself heavily invested in the story, but once it was apparent that these two characters liked each other, I was hooked. The relationship between Rufus and Alicia is masterfully done. Not once do the characters declare their feelings for each other, nor is there any other sort of physical intimacy hinted between them. They are both trying to save the world and prioritize this over their own feelings. But that doesn't stop the two from falling in love. It's shown in subtle ways, like here, where the party is hit with a wave of power. Everyone struggles to stay on the platform while Rufus holds Alicia in his arms. Or here, where Alicia drinks a poison that will turn her into the undead, just so Rufus doesn't have to face Odin alone. I thought no relationship would top Yuri and Alice's from Shadow Hearts, but I was wrong. Dislike 3. Bad teacher. Growing up, I worked construction with my dad. Now, my father knew just about all there was to know about building homes, and he was incredible at it. But he lacked a single important trait, which made working with him very difficult. My dad was terrible at teaching how to build a home. Video games can have a similar problem my dad has. A game can come up with the most intricate and clever systems. Systems that anyone who's mastered them will find their depth immeasurable. But the devs don't only have a responsibility for creating deep and detailed mechanics. They also have a responsibility for teaching the player how to use said mechanics. This is best accomplished by slowly introducing new features, allowing the player to master one technique before introducing another. Let's take the original Super Mario Bros. For example. When you boot up the game, the first thing you run into is a Goomba. A Goomba that just so happens to be walking underneath some blocks. If you jump to avoid, you'll most likely hit the block above, which will produce an item, while at the same time Mario will land on top of the Goomba, eliminating the threat. In just the first few seconds, the game has taught you the three main features of gameplay: jumping, blocks and items, and how to kill enemies. As you continue the level, you'll begin to use these three features in different ways. As you progress through the game, Super Mario Bros. Will add more complex levels, but only after it is certain the player has mastered the needed techniques. The reason I'm spending so much time explaining this is to say that VP2 is like my dad. Full of knowledge, yet lacks the ability to fully teach the player how to use said knowledge. I have multiple examples of gameplay mechanics that just aren't taught to you, or are taught to you in inconsistent ways. At first, there are these orbs that give you instructions. This was helpful, but probably should have had a more in-depth tutorial. They also should have been placed in other locations. There's so much that just isn't taught to the player. Mechanics like the synthesis that I mentioned, or learning skills. It awkwardly taught me how to release Einherjar with good equipment in order to gain stat-enhancing items. Hell, even assigning attacks for combos and using spells was something I kinda stumbled upon. I kept getting comments from subscribers during my playthrough where they would tell me that I was terrible at the game, or that I wasn't doing certain things correctly. How was I supposed to know? Alright, as I was writing this script, a thought came to my mind. I thought, what if most of the information I needed was in the manual? I just read through this bad boy, and yep, a lot of what I was missing was here. That doesn't excuse the game. Having a manual explain the majority of mechanics in the story is old school, but I guess it is on me to not have at least checked. Either way, VP2 doesn't hold your hand when explaining its game mechanics. Like 3, the battle system. VP2's battle system may be one of the most unique RPG battle systems I have ever experienced. Like I mentioned earlier, it's really broken up into 2 parts. The first is where you must position yourself, but don't be fooled here. This is the majority of the battle. Getting yourself in an advantageous position takes planning and calculated moves. Dashing, regenerating AP, retreating, and placement need to be carefully considered, especially during boss fights. Once you're in battle, you might be tempted, like I was for the majority of the game, to just button mash. Each of your 4 party members are mapped to a button, and pressing that button initiates their attack. Depending on your weapon, party members will cycle through up to 3 different attacks. Some which cause status elements or break shields, while others might toss the enemy up into the air, initiating an air combo. If you're just mashing buttons, you can easily waste an attack striking air. Getting your combos down is important, and towards the end, I could see the potential for so much more than I was doing. My main team consists of 3 light fighters and an archer. Light fighters attack quickly and could be used to increase the special attack gauge, while archers' attacks were accurate and deadly. If I were doing it over, I would have had either 2 archers and 2 light fighters, or 1 heavy fighter, 2 light fighters, and an archer. Oh, and I don't want to forget to mention the skills learned through equipping specific combination of accessories, a mechanic I had to learn on my own. These skills are complete game changers. Skills that saved me in battle were Free Item, which let me use items without using up AP, or Feint, which combined my attack and magic stat together, exponentially increasing the damage of characters like Fraudair. Dislike 2, the difficulty curve. When I reached the fire dungeon and got to the fire boss, I believed I was getting the hang of things. The game hadn't been particularly challenging, but hadn't been a cakewalk either. I had been paying attention to battles and had even discovered the skill mechanic. Upon entering the boss chamber, I used a strat where I hid behind the pillar and strategically attacked out of the boss's range. I felt pretty clever, honestly. I was able to slowly chip away at the boss's health, slowly whittling it down until I defeated it. At the time, I thought, alright, that was a difficult boss, but not unfair. Then the second phase started. Here, I had to face down an enemy with much larger range of attack, nearly quadruple the HP, and an AoE attack with the ability to instantly wipe out my team. I ended up grinding levels and rearranging my seal stones dozens of times, attempting the boss again only to have my ass handed to me. Overall, it took me a few hours of leveling before I was able to beat it. I thought this was a one-off, and perhaps the devs wanted to pressure the player into learning some of the deeper mechanics at this point. But nearly every boss moving forward is a severe jump in difficulty. This little archer kid and Hrist were notable for just how bad they demolished me in my first attempt. I got to the point that if I sensed a boss coming, I would pause and grind for about an hour. I power leveled for nearly 3 hours just to face Freya. What I'm trying to say is that there are some severe difficulty spikes in this game, mainly centered around its bosses. A veteran player might understand the deeper strats behind each boss and thus may probably be able to defeat them easily, but a new player will find that they are consistently underleveled, which is a shame. Like 2, the Seal Stones. At this point, I've explained how exploration works, how battles play out, and the intricacies involved. But what I've left out thus far is what I consider to be the most innovative mechanic in this title. In dungeons, there are pedestals containing seal stones. Each stone contains specific attributes that, if held by your party, is applied to them. If a stone is set in a pedestal, the attributes are applied to the enemies. When you leave a dungeon, all seal stones go back to their original place, unless you've spent crystals you gained from battle to have them stored permanently for your party's use. When you first start the game, you can only hold a single seal stone, but I eventually got to the point where I could hold 3. Now, there are your standard seal stones, such as Swordian Protection, which increases the affected party's attack by 120%, or Flaming Protection, which increases fire damage by 150% while decreasing ice damage by 50%. But then there are the unique ones. Seal Stones like Providing Friends Reason, which gives a 6 of gained experience to all benched party members. Or how about Coveting Taper's Reason, which doubles experience gained, but you get 0 gold from battle. One of the most effective debuff Seal Stones I found was Soul Shaving Hook's Commandment, which slowly drains HP. This was obviously one I would throw on a pedestal and use to chip at boss's health. Or how about one of my favorites, Desperate Soldier Law, which gave my party a 150 boost to attack, but didn't allow me to heal HP. I combined this with Swordian Blessing in the endgame to get a 270% attack boost. I could go on forever, and I didn't even see half the available stones. In the end, this was by far the coolest feature in the game, and I would love to see it replicated in future titles. Dislike 1. I didn't quite get it. So this is a hard concept to communicate, so I hope you'll be patient. There are certain personality types out there that like variety in their games. They jump between genres and never spend too much time in any one place. Then there are the purists, gamers who will replay something like Dark Souls dozens of times, scouring its every corner for hidden or obscure content. I fall somewhere in the middle with a slight emphasis towards variety. If you've watched any of my Games I Beat videos I post at the end of each year, you'll notice that I don't just play RPGs, but platformers, action titles, and even a little bit of horror. Now, I don't think there is a right way to play here. You do what you do. But it's obvious that certain games were created with the intent to be mastered. Take a game like Triangle Strategy that all but rejects the casual fan for those who want a deep, complex experience, one that requires the player to invest time and research into perfecting it. Valkyrie Profile 2 is such a game. Although I beat it, I feel like I still didn't get it. Most of the time, I felt as if I were just stumbling through the game, making random choices based off of shaky knowledge. Half the time, when I made the right choices, it was almost entirely dumb luck. Now, this isn't the negative you may think it is. What this says is that if you want to dive in, there is a lot VP2 can provide. But for someone who plans on beating it and moving on, the experience can be left wanting. I don't know, does that make sense? I love this title, but I never planned on mastering it. But at times, it felt like that was required in order to get the full experience. Like 1. The Einherjar. When Zeta asked me to play this title, I knew next to nothing about it. I had seen its PS1 prequel, but knew almost nothing about that game as well. Upon doing my initial research, my interest was instantly piqued when I found out that you can collect party members like Pokemon. Actually, it works more like a gacha game or possibly Xenoblade 2, which I love. As you explore, you'll come across the old broken weapons of fallen warriors. When you interact with these weapons, you will gain them as a party member. Now, each weapon has a certain percentage of giving you one of a few choices. For example, in the Royal Underground Passage, when you find this sword, you have a 25% chance to pull Rochelle, a 25% chance to pull Jessica, or a 50% chance to pull Sylphide. I got Rochelle in this pull. This not only provides great replayability, but also lets you customize your party however you want. At first, I didn't see much difference in attack between a heavy warrior and a light warrior. The light warriors attacked fast and increased my special gauge, so I went with an entire team of light warriors. Later, I added one archer. Strictly using light warriors was a mistake. One which I remedied just at the end game, but it ultimately didn't matter. You can make any team work as long as you're willing to put in the work. And might I say that the designs for the Einherjar are absolute peak. Nothing seemed phoned in here. And despite my complaints of design changes for in-game models, they looked amazing in battle nonetheless. Overall, if you're into collecting party members, this is the title for you. It's the single feature that sold me on the entire experience. And if I were to play again, I'd be excited to try out other party members. Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria is an ingenious game. There are no simple mechanics here, and for any player who loves to spend time mastering a title, VP2 is the game for you. The fact that you can collect over 50 party members that vary enough that each stands out as a unique addition is amazing. And the graphics, music, Nordic mythology, and subtle character development only helps to enhance the experience. My only true complaint is its difficulty, the lack of in-game tutorials, and just how much investment VP2 expects from you. Overall though, this is the second best title I've completed so far for this challenge, only surpassed by Shadow Heart's Covenant. And that's my review. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting this obsession of mine. A special thanks to Zeta for not only requesting this title, but walking me through it as well. I do hope to do a 9 list in the future. If you would like to see my scores for each title, you can go to my shared document in the description. There I lay out the rules for my ratings as well as the list of 160 titles I plan on beating. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all later.